Cal, why do some men say they need freedom but still feel empty when they get it?
Because what they call freedom is often just an escape from responsibility. Not a journey toward the self, but a retreat from pain, from commitment, from the parts of themselves they refuse to face. They run to feel free, but freedom without inner truth is just another prison, only wider and lonelier.
I am Sham, and I'm back with a brand new track, and what triggered this conversation within me was an older gentleman at a community dinner, which is generally a homeless dinner, serving meals at various places throughout Seattle. I hadn't seen him in years because I hadn't been in Seattle in years, and I love to attend these functions, not only because you get a meal, but because you get to meet amazing people. And we sat down and talking about kind of the current situation, about how folks these days, young folks these days, forget the lessons of history. And yes, they did apply to us. At some point, we were young, idealistic, and we thought certain things which were not the truth. Again, because they are so idealistic, they don't match reality. And we look at the sense of freedom as being able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. But we fail to realize these qualifying factors. What kind of support base do you have? You have a place to go home to in an emergency? Do you have people who are there for you? Do you have things that you can fall back on in the worst case scenario? These are things that many people who pursue so-called freedom forget about. They're not conscious of the safety net that they have. And as you enjoy these so-called freedoms, what are you leaving behind? You're leaving behind responsibilities and skill development, and the world progressing in a parallel plane as to what you are currently doing. The world's still moving on as you're out there exploring, adventuring, and having fun. But what if that ends? What if you get to a stage based on age, injury, and such, where you're like, hey, I need to scale back and reintroduce myself to the so-called real world? What is going to happen then? Living this vagabond, hobo, etc. lifestyle, you are in a way shielding yourself from the real world. And you're dependent on the generosity of others. You're also dependent on work, meaning temp work. In this so-called gig economy, there is menial tasks like warehousing, which you can do. How long is that going to exist? Because the age of automation is accelerating towards us, especially with the advent of AI. How many of these things can be replaced, which you are currently doing, in order to further fund this so-called freedom? There's going to be a reckoning, definitely, where menial tasks are going to be done away with. We're going to be focused on skilled labor, and when we are out there just doing things for fun, for excitement, for so-called freedom, we're going to be missing out on that development, which is going to keep us ahead of the curve of advancement. At that point, you're going to ask yourself, am I running towards freedom or running away from responsibility? Imagine having, again, no safety net. You are it. That is it. You succeed, it's because of you. You fail, it's because of you. And if you fail, it is rock bottom. Ain't nobody coming there to get you out. These are things to consider. So for me, coming from a complete gutter background, broken childhood, I thought to myself, hey, how can I make myself valuable to the system? You need to make yourself valuable to other people, as weird as it seems. Because within this lifestyle of vagabond hobo, there's way too much idealism. There's way too much counterculture. F this, F that. I'm going to do my own thing. But you fail to realize that you are the most dependent on the system. You need to have social programs. You need to have infrastructure. You need to have mechanisms which ensure your safety and livelihood and such. So as somebody who felt enslaved because of my childhood, because of poverty, I'm thinking, what is the best way to escape? Academics is the number one thing. Either, going to school and or learning a trade. Pursuing athletics as well as a mechanism in terms of maybe getting a scholarship to alleviate that financial situation. You need to look at traditional mechanisms in order to advance. They are there. They're there for a reason. They're built into the system. And if you utilize them in the correct way, that is the way to get ahead. So I looked at ways of how I can actually have my own freedom. You need to be financially viable. You need to have a skill which translates into the real world as making you money for eternity. These are things that cannot be replaced. So I looked at being an apprentice, electrician apprentice, getting into the trades, something that cannot be replaced, that's always in demand. And that's the way I wanted to go. You can look at other careers if you want freedom, which have a schedule which is curated to your desired way of living. Maybe you have to do that job for 3 weeks straight, then you get a week off, right? Looking at things that have a schedule that fits the way that you want to live is definitely paramount. But to sit there and just have nothing going for you and saying, I'm going to abandon everything and just hit the road, hit the streets, do whatever I want, and I'll worry about it later, you are setting yourself up for failure again, because in the long term, there's going to come a point when you're going to have to face reality, face real life, go back into society, and it's going to be like, hey, what have you given me? And the world is going to have left you behind. And now you're going to have to face an even greater headache and an even harsher reality than the one that you're facing. So it's always about this short-term pleasure that you're sacrificing long-term success for. So in the end, analyze things as such that you are singular, everything depends on you, you are only operating within yourself, and you are constrained by that. Now, if you can operate within that function indefinitely, cool, you've made it. But to fool yourself into thinking that, hey, I'm experiencing so-called freedom right now and it's going to last forever, and totally forgetting what is supporting you, is delusional. Again, I am always going to reinforce, develop yourself early on. This is not about just discarding your youth and saying, hey, screw the system, this and that, I'll figure it out later. Because again, later is too late. And then you're setting yourself up for a nightmare scenario. Figure stuff out now which can prolong that freedom. It's crazy because a lot of people are against this, but being really financially set allows you this plethora of options. Imagine if you just find a way to make so much money that you can put it away in this or that, and you can live off those dividends. You can have your own plot of land, do whatever you want. Is that not a better scenario? To have some sort of ownership and true escape into something else. Because if you're just roaming around, you are dependent on everybody else doing their job. In conclusion, focus on developing yourself to the utmost, academically, athletically, spiritually, and such, to get to a point where you can look down and be like, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z in order to get to this point. But you have to have a certain self-awareness to realize that if you're going to be willy-nilly, things are not going to end up well, and that you have to have some sort of structure, and you need to be able to make sacrifices to enjoy that long-term freedom. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, we're all searching for this, so it definitely takes a certain effort to get to that point. But to think that you don't have to make any effort and you can just run away and feel like you are experiencing freedom is not the case. So reel it back, really look deep within yourself and reflect on that and realize there's much work to be done.